All right. Good morning, everyone. Thank you so much for being here today. My name is Hai Nguyen. I'm co-founder of Affluence, the company behind Protomatrix. I want to let you know that this webinar is recorded, and so we'll be sharing the posting afterwards. And then in the chat section, I'd welcome any questions. This is your chance to ask me any questions you have around using Protomatrix, best practices, etc. I'll try my best to cover the basics of Protomatrix, but I know that everyone's use cases are unique. So feel free to leverage the chat, and whenever appropriate, I'll answer those questions. With that, we'll get started. Right. Our goals for today: 1, help you understand the basics of Protomatrix. 2, provide you a framework to get the most out of Protomatrix with the least work, and then help you envision what your work and life success would look like with Protomatrix. Hopefully you're here today because you're looking at a way to become more effective and more productive at prioritizing your tasks, your email. And so hopefully that I will do my best to address those questions. And then when you walk away from the webinar, I want you to be excited about the potential of Protomatrix and how it can affect your day-to-day workload management. One of the things I always want to emphasize is the challenges that customers face. And so I've talked to thousands of customers literally over the years. I've seen every use case in almost across every vertical. And one of the things that seems to be recurring are the following 3 challenges. First, team members have trouble understanding what's priority right now. Now, we all understand that at the end of the day, it's a personal thing, right? Task management, priority management, it starts with you as an individual, the challenges that you face. But at least when it's in your mind, you know what it is. It's really hard to understand what your teammates are working on, what they consider priorities. And so that's a challenge that a lot of people struggle with. And then secondly, over the last couple of years, one of the things I've seen is that all of us are taking on more responsibilities than ever before. We don't really have specialization as much as we used to. And so it's really difficult to keep track on the status across all of those areas of responsibility. So many projects that's happening at any point in time. And then for better or worse, over the last couple of years, more and more tools have surfaced up in terms of chat and communication and so forth. But one of the things that I've discovered is that it's causing challenges around too much context switching. Now, not only do you have meetings and emails, now you have Microsoft Teams or Slack or all these other project and task management software. And so everyone's struggling with actually putting all this together across all these software. And so you're switching context constantly. So Protomatrix is designed to tackle these challenges and more. What it is a comprehensive email priority and project management software to help teams focus on prioritizing emails, conduct more efficient meetings, and get real-time status update on critical projects and priorities. Now, we use the word priorities a lot. And I obviously say it 1,000 times in a webinar like this. And the reason we talk about priorities is because it's not just about tasks. Priorities is about understanding what it is that you need to work on within the bigger context, right? There's many, many things that you have to do at any point in time. But what is the one thing that would make the biggest impact? And so we talk about priorities constantly for that reason. And hopefully, when you walk away from this webinar, you'll understand how Protomatrix helps you understand what single task or what are the 25% of tasks that you should be working on at this very moment. So how does Protomatrix tackle those 3 problems that I mentioned? First, we use something called the 4-quadrant methodology to promote effective prioritization. I'll go into details in just a little bit on what the 4-quadrant methodology is. And then secondly, Protomatrix provide views such as the one-on-one agenda timeline to help you understand what needs to be done within the right context. And then finally, Protomatrix provide deep integrations into software you already use, such as Microsoft Teams and Outlook, for effective emails and task prioritization. So what makes Protomatrix different? First, it's the only project email and meeting management software that's Microsoft 365 security certified for the web app, Teams app, and Outlook app. So if you're looking at Protomatrix for your organizations or for your team or whatever it is, one thing that you can walk away understanding is that Protomatrix is vetted by Microsoft constantly as a solution that works extremely well for these for the purposes that we talk about today. And then secondly, Protomatrix is actually deeply integrated into the Microsoft ecosystem. And in fact, there's so many exciting things that we're working on the AI side, as well as integrations with the Microsoft intelligence system that allows you to be more productive, not just today, but also in the future. And then one of the things that that I like about Protomatrix is this people-centric aspect of it. One of the things that I like to emphasize is that when you work on something, you usually work on it for somebody, right? You're not doing it in some silo environment. It's either a task that you do for yourself or for your manager or for your colleague or your family members, etc. And so Protomatrix can actually take all these things that you're working on and try to give you some sense on who it is that you're working for. And then finally, Protomatrix is available as a SaaS solution, a HIPAA compliant solution for healthcare and life sciences, and an Azure government cloud solution. So Protomatrix has thousands of paying customers across the globe, and we serve almost every single vertical, every single industry, and we have customers ranging from pharmaceuticals to state governments to educational institutions, et cetera. So we have seen pretty much everything. So if you have any questions around some of our enterprise offering, please feel free to reach out to us, either support@affluence.com or hi@affluence.com, and I'd be happy to go into more details there. And so with that, I want to talk about the fundamentals behind Protomatrix. So there's a quote attributed to former President Eisenhower: "What is important is seldom urgent, and what is urgent is seldom important." And the reason I always bring this quote up is because it encompasses the philosophy behind Protomatrix so well, which is every single day, you, me, every single person that you interact with are bombarded by tasks and new work and so forth. And a lot of time it's urgent, as in, hey, could you do this? Could you do that, etc. But it's not really important, as in, if I get this done, does it move my goals forward? Do I achieve what I need to achieve in order to hit my objective for the quarters or my personal goals, etc.? And those are actually on completely different dimensions. So instead of having a single task list, the challenge for you then is figure out where does it fit within the two dimensions of importance and urgency. So if I ask you right now, take out a piece of paper and start writing down the 50 things you have to do. And I say 50 because it's ridiculously hard, because all of us have so many things that's on our plate. But now, if you look at that long list, where do you start, right? When you start in the morning, do you start at the top? Do you start at the bottom? Do you start somewhere in the middle? And so instead, what Protomatrix does is it forces you to take this list of action items and split it into these buckets called the do now, the plan, the delegate, and the inbox. The inbox is where everything starts. This is where, okay, I have this 50 items in this list. Now let's take this and parse it and say, what are the things I have to work on now because it's important and urgent? What are the things I should plan for because it's important but not yet urgent? And then what are the things I can delegate to others? And the do now is essentially firefighting. So if you have a lot of tasks in the do now quadrant, it means you're constantly fighting fires. That's not a good thing. In fact, if you use Protomatrix more and more, hopefully your do now starts collapsing and you have fewer and fewer things there. And instead, where you should really be spending your time is on the planning side. And then the delegate are the things that maybe someone else can do a better job for. It could be your direct report, but at the same time, it could be a third party or something like that, where they can actually do some of these more mundane action items that's not relevant to your goal. I mean, a very rudimentary example of that is restaurants, right? Why do restaurants exist? It's because we want to delegate the cooking and the cleaning to somebody else. It's not because you can't do it, but that's because it's just better. Someone else does a better job at that. Now you can extrapolate that same analogy to the work that you have to do, and that's why you have so many software systems out there that does specific tasks, because that's what maybe some of these things you can delegate to. So look at everything you have to do from this perspective. What are the things you should be spending your time on, which is again the quadrants 1 and 2, the do now and the plan for, and then what are the other things that you can drop. So do this exercise when you get a chance, again, taking all the tasks that you have, prioritize them into these buckets. And then here's the next part. Take this quadrant, all these tasks you have in these quadrants, and walk around the office and start comparing notes. And this is where the magic happens with Protomatrix. What happens is that in your mind, you have your priorities, but guess what? your teammates, your coworkers, your managers, your direct reports, your executives may also have their own list of priorities. And the question is, does it match? Is there alignments? And if there's always alignment and you walk around the office and everyone agrees on every priorities, then you're the unicorn out there, and very, very few have achieved that. So what's really interesting is that success from using Protomatrix is exactly around identifying the disagreement. And it is not obvious at all because, when people use a task management software or priority management software, they think they're just tracking the tasks that they have to do, which is perfectly fine, but that's not valuable because you can use any software for that. So the way Protomatrix helps and way differentiates from everything else is that it shows you and your coworkers immediately where the discrepancies are. Because when your manager looks at your 4 quadrants and they look at the do now and the plan for, and they're like, wait a minute, shouldn't this be here and shouldn't that be there, et cetera, then suddenly you can actually have meaningful discussions around it. So one of the things I've seen really successful customers do is that when they have meetings, they project Protomatrix onto the big screen. Why? It's because then everyone can look at it and everyone can see what the priorities are. And it is so clear what you should be focusing your time on, what you should be focusing your effort on. And then instead of actually going down the list and talking about things that don't matter, talk about the things that matter and then focus on the discrepancy. So this is not obvious, by the way, and so I hope that when you walk away from this webinar and when you're using Protomatrix, you're really leveraging it for this particular purpose, which is using Protomatrix as that communication tool. If you put nothing in Protomatrix except for only the most critical priorities and then using it as a way to have more effective meetings, then I'd be happy to see that because that means you're going to get a lot of value out of it. So the 4-quadrant Eisenhower matrix create alignment because it forces you to prioritize from the beginning. You don't get to walk away with that list, right? You have to put into these buckets. As mentioned, this webinar is recorded, and we do have previous recorded webinars at affluence.com/webinars. That's our contact information as well. And so with this, I'm going to go ahead and jump into the product presentation to show you how to actually put this into practice. As I mentioned, if you have questions during the webinar, please send it in the chat, and then I'll open it and I'll take a look at it and I'll try my best to answer it. Okay, let's jump into the application itself. So here I have the Protomatrix application open. If you look at this screen, the thing that should look front and center to you is the 4 quadrants. You can see how I have a project called My Team Priorities, and then I have 4 quadrants. Now the terminology I have here in the quadrants, this is the do now, this is the things I should plan for, this is the one I delegate, and this is the inbox. But immediately you can see that I can actually change the name of these quadrants, but that's not the important part. The important part is that everything I have to do fits within the framework of this 2x2 matrix. And by the way, just an aside, we've had customers ask, why can't you do like 3x4 matrix and so forth and m/n matrix? That's not the point. The point is, if you have so much granularity, it becomes meaningless, right? Because now then, you start questioning, wait a minute, where should I put something, quadrant 2, 2 to the right, 3 to the top, etc. Then it's too much thinking, too much planning. So there's a compromise somewhere in between, and the 2x2 matrix is the perfect compromise when you look at it from the large perspective. So keep that in mind. So here, again, I have a list of projects. On my left-hand side, I have the quadrant in the middle, and then on the right-hand side is called the item and the project details. When you create a task in Protomatrix, it is very, very straightforward. You see how I can actually hover over each quadrant, and then these options called add items pops up, right? So when I click on that, it allows me to create a task really quickly. So for example, let's just say if I want to go and follow up with webinar participants. So that's an example of a task that maybe I want to create and assign to myself. So when I create this task, one of the things I can do is actually I can set the due date for me automatically. I can go and say due tomorrow, 2 p.m. So what Protomatrix does is Protomatrix takes the action item that you create, and then if there's a due date on it, it will interpret that using natural language. So as you can see, when my task is created, on the right-hand side, the item details open, my task goes, the task name is here, and then the due date is set for me for tomorrow at 2 p.m. I didn't have to go and click on, the calendar and all that. When I create the task, I always set the due date here directly. And it's just so much easier because it allows me to sort of set it and forget it. Now, Party Matrix will remind me to work on this task, and it's very, very straightforward. And so let's go down the list on the item details here. It tells me what project I'm in. It tells me the item name. I can click on this and change the item name if needed. I can actually star it. So the way starring works is the following. When you star a task, it pops to the top of the quadrant. So you can see how I can have a star task in quadrant 1, I can have a star task in quadrant 2, 3, 4, etc. When you have star tasks, we actually have special reports on that as well. But for anything that's important, I like to star them. Now, one thing to keep in mind, if you star everything, and if you put everything in quadrant 1, then if everything is important and urgent, then nothing is important and urgent. So starring everything is one way to ensure that you have zero visibility on what's important. My personal rule of thumb is never more than 25% of tasks in quadrant 1, and never more than 25% of tasks in quadrant 2, and never more than 25% of your tasks is starred. It's just my own personal rule of thumb. I actually don't have that many starred items, so I reserve that for the most important things. And then as you scroll down this list, there's a place for you to add icons. You can see if I click on icons, I can choose an icon. It's intended to be visual cue, and so it just adds another dimension to the task to make it easier for you to see. Imagine if it's travel related or a phone call or a meeting, etc. And then down here, it has the owner. The owner is the person responsible for the task. And if you look at the owner, there's an avatar of the owner for every single task. Now, every task will have one owner, and you can have multiple followers. There can only be one owner. And the reason for that is because we want to ensure that there is clear ownership for everything. And this is, again, I've had customers ask, hey, I want multiple owners because these two people are responsible for this task. Our answer is always no, and we have no plans on changing that, by the way. The reason for that is because if you have multiple owners, there's no clarity on who should get it done. Between those multiple owners, have one person be responsible, right? Now that person is the person who will mark the task as done, etc. But of course, anybody can mark the task as done, but when it comes down to ownership, there's an owner, and then you can click on this plus to invite followers. Followers are people who will get notification when this task is updated. Example, let's say you want to delegate a task to your direct report to ask them to do something. Well, you can create the task, assign to them, and you're automatically invited as a follower because you created the action item. When they mark that task as done, you get notified. Or if they update the task, you get notified. So if you're interested in a task, add yourself as a follower. Then you have progress, which is 0 to 100%. 100% means it's done. Again, it's a very visual way to see, okay, is this moving along? Some tasks are actually better just to have on, done or not done, but others might take a while. One of the best practices we have is sometimes you need a review process. What that means is you have a task and you need someone to actually take a look at it, but it's not completely done. So then you can move the progress bar to 90%. Then you assign it to the person who needs to review, and then they'll go and they'll mark that task as done. You have effort, which is just a way to specify how long a task will take. Not every task is created equal. So, some will take an hour, some will take a day. And so it's just a way that for you to actually generate reports down the road to see how much effort you've spent or how overloaded every person is. You don't need to use the effort section. You don't need to use the progress section. Both of those are optional in terms of getting value out of Party Matrix. What you need to use in Party Matrix, though, is the due date. So I highly recommend that every task has a due date to it. You can always change the due date later, but use it because when you have the dimensions of date and the dimensions of importance, Party Matrix will be a lot more intelligent, will help you identify where you should focus your time. One of the things I want to mention is the difference between reminders and due dates. So let's just say if you're working on taxes, right? You can have the due date of April 15th, but then if you wait until April 15th, you're not going to get that done. So you might want to remind yourself a month prior to that. So that's the difference. And so one of the things I like to do is whenever I have a due date, I typically set a reminder for a day in advance or a few hours in advance or sometimes even a month in advance. So I literally have a task, for example, to follow up with certain customers in a year, and I would say, remind me. So for example, this one I have due tomorrow at 2 p.m. So I can say, remind me in 3 hours, right? So what this is going to do is Party Matrix will go and send me a reminder in my notification. But if this task was due in 2 weeks, so let's just say, now I'm going to change the due date to due in 2 weeks, and I'm going to say, remind me daily. So now what happens is I have a task. I know that's going to be due in 2 weeks, but every single day, Party Matrix will send me a notification. You can think of all the possible ways that you can use this to your benefit, because when it comes to prioritization, there's the difference between actually knowing what you need to do and then actually getting reminders to get it done. And I really like to set recurring reminders because I'm busy. I have a lot of things on my plate at any point in time. If I don't get a constant reminder, I'll forget. And not only that, sometimes some team members need to have a constant reminder. So in fact, when you assign a task to your coworker, right, or your direct report and say, hey, could you get this done in 2 weeks? Remind everybody daily, guess what? It's going to send them a reminder and it brings it back to the top of mind. So just keep that in mind as a way to leverage Party Matrix to ensure that your most important tasks are done. Now, if you did this to every task, it's going to be very noisy. You don't want to do that. So again, use the reminder function in a careful manner, but use it to your advantage to make sure that the most important things never get dropped. And now as we go further down, there's the chat section. Now you probably saw how I've been typing some stuff into the chat section, such as remind me in 3 hours, due in 2 weeks, remind me daily, etc. So Party Matrix, of course, has buttons that you can press, but at the same time, you can sort of write to it. And whenever you see a green text, it means that our system has interpreted it. So I use it to assign it to people. I use it to set reminders and so forth. But what's really neat about the chat section is it actually tracks everything that's happening. So there's a record of all the changes, right? The reason it's valuable is if you have an action item and then you have a due date, and then later on you change the due date, well, it's very important to know that the due date's been changed or somebody has updated, etc. So you can also use the chat section to communicate with your coworkers around specific tasks as well. Let me give an example. Let's just say if a client sent you an email and with that email asking to do something, and then from your perspective, you need to actually pull in multiple team members. You need to pull in engineering or customer success, product manager or an executive, etc. So if you just took the client email and you forwarded it to everybody, right, you can actually use that as a form of communication. And I guarantee that some of you do this right now. And so now you have an email thread and you're talking about a bunch of different things. Great. Problem is, in an email thread, you don't know the status of the task. Imagine if the task is marked as done. Well, how would you know that it was done? Or imagine if you have additional notes that you need to update, or you need to assign the task to somebody else. An email thread becomes completely cumbersome and completely useless when it's more advanced than when your needs are more than just letting other people know that there's an email. So with Party Matrix, you can look at this as like that email thread, but the difference is you're able to set due dates, set reminders, and everyone can be on the same page and everyone can have a conversation around it and talk about it directly in this chat. So then what's really neat is that, let's just say in 6 months, you have a new coworker that comes in and needs to take over this action item. Guess what? They can open this task, they can look in the chat section and see the full history, everything that's been talked about, everything that's been changed for this task in particular, right? There's no way they can do something like this with email. There's no way they can do it with any other system, but with Party Matrix and with our chat system here, they can do that. And then what's really helpful too is if you have a coworker who's no longer at your organization and they've been updating Party Matrix, they have all these notes and so forth. In a year, in 2 years, you can look back in the chat section of that task and know exactly what decisions have been made and why they did it. So I know it's a very, very simple thing, but at the same time, the power there is so it's so powerful of a capability, and people don't use it enough and don't realize how powerful that it is to have a contextual conversation about every single task. Then you have the notes section. This is not meant to, replace Microsoft Word or Google Docs or whatever. It's just a place for you to add additional information about the task itself, but also you can create subtasks. So you can click on this and create a subtask. If you have 5 subtasks and you mark one as done, then the progress will update to 20%. And then finally, you have the resources section. Resources is helpful for you to attach other information related to this task. For example, let's just say if you run HR, and with HR, every 2 weeks you have to go and actually run the process, but at the same time, maybe there's additional documents around hours or other regulatory stuff that you have to do. Well, in the resource section, you can actually upload all that information into one central place. So the way the resource section works is it's a place for you to have files, emails, links, and that could link to your SharePoint. In fact, Proteomatrix can link all the Proteomatrix tasks together as well. So every task, every project in Proteomatrix has a link to it. And in fact, the reason why it works so well is because every email in Microsoft Outlook and every conversation you have in Microsoft Teams also have links. So Proteomatrix allows you to link all of that together into one central place. Now, do you need this resource section? Mostly not if you're very new to Proteomatrix, but if you want to get the most out of Proteomatrix, the resources section is really helpful. And again, this is where you can attach emails and so forth. So I'll show you how to attach emails and prioritize them in just a little bit. So this is the resource section, and that's essentially is the detailed section around the task. I've shown you probably 80% of the capabilities, but there are other information that you can add to it and so forth. But if you use some of these features that I mentioned, you'll get the most out of it. Again, my emphasis is use due dates, use reminders, make sure you assign to the appropriate person, use star if appropriate, but don't overdo it. Now let's step back further and let's take a look at the project level. Here on my left-hand side, you see how I have a list of projects. So I got, 30 projects or so here. In my real account, my work account, I have something like 250 or 300 projects. So that's a lot of projects, but Proteomatrix is meant to handle that. So what is a project? So there's several types of project. The first is what's called a transient project. So you can think of a transient project as, let's just say something that has a start date and an end date. So perhaps it could be an initiative that you're working on for 3 months. That's a transient project. And then you have what's called a persistent project. And a persistent project is one that lasts forever. So for example, in our company, we have a project for every one of our applications. So our web app, Teams app, iOS app, etc. All of them have different projects, right? And so those projects don't have an end date because they're always growing. There's always tasks and priorities and so forth. So when you create a project, just keep that in mind. Is it a persistent one or is it a transient one? Doesn't really matter. It doesn't change anything, but that's how you deal with the various type of projects. And so a personal to-do list is an example of a persistent project. A team priority list is an example of a persistent project. So to create a project in Proteomatrix is very, very straightforward. You click on the project here, and then you choose Create Project. Now, when you create a project, you have several options. The first, you can always create a blank project. So if I click on blank project, I can literally just type in the project name, right? Whatever that might be. I can add notes to describe the project if needed, completely optional. And then I can choose from some basic templates. So these are 7 or so templates that you can choose from, the basic Proteomatrix, and then I can choose a color coding. So go ahead and I'm going to do that. I'm going to do this as a test project here. Okay. And so that's it. You see now a project is created, the do now, the do later, the delegate, postpone. Now let's go back to the list, the ability for me to create other type of projects. One of the things I can also do is actually I can choose from templates, other templates that we've created. So I showed you the quadrants, but one of the things that you can do with Proteomatrix is customize those quadrants. You can customize the quadrant names, you can customize the quadrant colors. The reason we let you do that is because Proteomatrix is a very flexible tool that helps you communicate your priorities. But at the same time, we understand that within an organization, you have different terminologies that you might use, or you might have ways of actually coding your list of action items. So for example, you might have various colors for your marketing tasks, different colors for engineering tasks, etc. So because of that flexibility, there's actually several hundred public templates that we've created with Proteomatrix, allowing you to leverage the tool in numerous ways, right? You can use it for, again, SWOT analysis or effort impact analysis, etc. I don't want to go into those because, they're very specific to different type of use cases, etc. But I want you to be aware that Proteomatrix has that flexibility. When you go and create a project, you can actually go to a public template section. And in here, we actually have a few templates that we share with users that we've created over the years. You can choose from any of these as a starting point instead of a blank project. Or you can actually also create your own internal templates. And so it's actually really helpful because let's just say, again, you're in HR. Within HR, whenever you onboard an employee, you might have 30 things that they need to do, right? These are the 5 things they need to do in day 1. These are the 5 things they need to do in the next month. And then these are the training videos they need to watch over the next 3 months. So imagine if you created that Party Matrix project. Now with that project, what you can do is you can save that as a template. So when you have a new employee, you simply launch it from one of your template. Those 30 tasks will get created for you. You just say the start date, and then all the other due dates get created for you automatically. Extremely helpful if you have repetitive processes. And this could be everything from employee onboarding, client onboarding, or quarterly reviews, etc. So use your own internal template whenever appropriate. And then we have one more option, which is created with AI. This is actually a really neat capability. What it's doing is it's leveraging your goals and it's leveraging your job title and job function and industry to create projects for you. The idea is not to go and actually, create perfect tasks for you to achieve your goal. What it does is it gives you a starting point. So for example, let's say my goal is to get a promotion, or my goal is to improve my quarterly performance or something like that. I can actually type that here and Party Matrix will create a series of tasks appropriate for that. This is something I'll let you play with because it's pretty neat. But one of the things that I want you to walk away from today's webinar is, one, make sure you create a project for your personal task. Make sure you create a project for a goal, like an AI goal here. And then make sure you create a project on a key initiative that you're working on with your manager or your direct reports or whatever it is. So then you have one central place to track all of that. Okay. So let's go back to Party Matrix. Go back to this view here. Again, this is my list of projects. And now let's jump into email management. The reason actually, a lot of customers come to Party Matrix because of email management. It's one of those things where, I get a couple hundred emails a day. And so from that, it's very, very difficult to stay on top of it. I can't just go and flag them. I mean, I imagine that's what a lot of you do. Flagging is great if you have 5 flag emails. Flagging is not so great if you have 50 flag emails and it keeps piling up, right? Because then when you start your day, how do you know which emails to go after? So with Party Matrix, we're able to take an email and convert it into a task along with all the other metadata around it, which is due dates, reminders. You can delegate it. You can add additional context if needed. So let me show you how that works. So when you're in Outlook, go to the App Store here and then install Party Matrix. Now, one of the things that I want to bring up real quick is you see how we actually, you'll see 3 different public versions of Party Matrix. You have the blue version, which is the standard version, which is what most of you should be using. The HIPAA is if you're in healthcare, life sciences, and the government cloud. So anyways, I'm going to choose this one right here. When you install, say I have an email here, and from this email, I want to prioritize it, right? So I click on this option and I click on Party Matrix. Oh, there you go. Now it's in the right place. And you see I have 2 choices. I have the ability to open a Party Matrix or ability to prioritize the email. I'm going to go ahead and click on prioritize email. So what's going to happen is that Party Matrix will open on the right-hand side here, and then it lets me capture the email as a task. So you see what it's going to do is take the subject of the email and create it as my task name. I can change this as needed. And then the other thing I can do is actually I can decide what project it goes in, right? So for example, I'm going to go ahead and choose the test project that I created earlier, and then I can choose what quadrant it goes in. I can assign it to the appropriate person. I can set the due date directly from here. And then that's it. I just click capture email. And so you see the moment I click capture email, what it's doing is create a task. And now the right-hand side is exactly the item details that you saw earlier. Again, I have the project name, I can star it, I can set due dates, reminders directly from here. What's really neat about this is that when I go back to my Party Matrix, so let's go back here. You see I go back to my test project, that email was created right here. And then imagine if I'd assign this to a coworker, they can go and they can take a look at this email. They can click on the resource section, the EML files attached. They can open that email. They can write a comment back to me, or they can actually respond to the customer directly. So it is a lot more powerful than just marking the email as flag, and it's a lot more powerful than just setting a reminder on the email. Because the problem with the reminder on the email is then it doesn't give you the rest of the context, right? Imagine if you have to do a lot of things for that email. It is very difficult to do it with an existing email software. And so Protomatrix allowed me to have all this other prioritization metadata on top of it. I can put it in the appropriate project in the appropriate quadrant. It's very, very straightforward for me to understand exactly what I need to work on at any point in time. And the other thing is that it actually pulls everything together. And so now, not only do I have tasks, I have tasks from emails as well. Now, what if you get an email, but you already have a task associated with it? So Protomatrix actually is intelligent enough to recognize that sometimes you have an email that may belong in another task. So instead, what I can do is I open Protomatrix again, right? But now I'm going to open the panel instead of actually prioritizing tasks directly. And then from here, I can actually hover over, I can search for a task in Protomatrix and then hover over and attach an email to an existing task. The use case is pretty straightforward. You have a follow-up from a client, and the client says, hey, what's the status of some particular task? And guess what? You already have that task in place, and maybe there's multiple people involved in working on that task. Instead of creating another action item, right? Or instead of forwarding this email to the group again, and now you're just creating multiple threads, and it gets very, very confusing. Protomatrix allows you to take multiple emails and put it into one single task, and now you still have one central place to have all the communication that you need. The other thing you probably could see too is if I go and I choose to prioritize an email, Protomatrix actually can go and detect if there's a duplicate item for you. And the reason for this is pretty simple. Let's just say if you got an email from, again, an external party, and you and your coworkers are both CC'd on it, then your coworker creates that email as a task. Well, then when you go and do it too, guess what? Protomatrix goes and say, hey, wait a minute, there probably is a potentially duplicate task. Are you sure? Let's just check to make sure. So it's a very simple use case, but we've talked to customers where this is really important because sometimes you just have multiple people working on so many different things. And this goes back to the central tenet around Protomatrix helping team members understand their priorities and better communicate their priorities. Well, part of that is actually ensuring that you're not creating duplicate work and that everyone's on the same page. And so that's how Protomatrix works with this email prioritization, but then making sure that you actually have clear communication within your entire team and not just yourself. So that's how email prioritization work. I can take any email and convert it to a task. Now let's jump over to Microsoft Teams. So Protomatrix is probably the most integrated solution in the Microsoft Teams environment. And in fact, I'm so excited about the future integrations that we have as well, which I can't talk about, but there's so many things we're doing with Teams that's absolutely phenomenal over the next 6 months or so. So if you use Microsoft Teams, definitely go and install Protomatrix. When you install Protomatrix, make sure you pin it on the left-hand side here. When you do, then you can actually just click on this and then it opens up Protomatrix. And as you can see, the view that I have inside Teams is very similar to the web app view, right? I have my list of projects and then I have the quadrant in the middle, then the item details. So what that allows me to do is actually have a very seamless experience. And in fact, I really like using Protomatrix inside Teams because then I have one less context switching. I really, I have enough windows open that I can't go and just have more and more tabs. So instead, I just go click on here whenever I need to, and I can see the tasks that I have inside Protomatrix. I can browse through them as needed. There's one major difference, which is the menu is pretty much hidden up here, but if you click on that, then you still have access to that create project menu, the project list, the home view, etc. Now, what I have open here instead is the home view. So you can see when I open Teams, my app inside Teams, at the top here, I have a home view. And it has a number 41 on it. That means there are 41 tasks that require my attention. Going back to earlier when we have a task and you set a due date and the start date and all that, well, guess what? When there's a reminder that says, hey, you need to work on this and so forth, Protomatrix creates something in the alert section for you. And then from here, you can go through this list to ensure that you're actually working on the things that need to be worked on. So for me personally, when I start my day, this is where I start. I click on the home view, I go to the alert section, and I can see all the tasks that's been assigned to me or tasks that I assigned to others that got updated, or whatever changes, reminders, etc. And I can click through each of these and I can process them as needed. And that gets me to inbox 0. But sometimes you just want to clear old stuff. So sometimes, maybe say you're on vacation or something like that, you come back and a bunch of tasks got updated. You can actually click on clear notifications, and then you can clear everything, or you can clear older tasks, etc. So that's the home view. And so this view also exists in the web app, but in Microsoft Teams, this is where it's at. Now, the functionality is pretty much the same as web app, so I won't go into the details. So let me show you what's unique about our Teams integrations. One thing that I really like is inside Teams, if you have a one-on-one with somebody, you can add what's called the Party Matrix one-on-one tab. When I open this one-on-one tab, what it's doing is it's showing me all the tasks I have in common with my coworker. Earlier, I talked about the people-centric aspect of Party Matrix. Let's dig into that for a little bit. So right now, I imagine you probably have so many project management software you've worked with before, your task list and so forth. But I have a question for you. How would you find out everything you have to do with your manager? Right? Can you go and find and tell me right now, like, exactly what the priorities are? What are the things you have to do for your manager across everything? And so typically what you have to do is you have to open up your project management software, your task list, your OneNote, your to-do, whatever, and you have to go through every project, look at what the things you have to do and find the due dates, etc. Party Matrix flips all of that around, and actually our one-on-one view is designed to identify everything you have to do for somebody across your entire Party Matrix space. So when I have the one-on-one view here with Eugenia, for example, and I go to one-on-one and I have her selected, this shows me everything I have to do. And what's really neat is in this list, I can see the quadrants, I can see the icons, I can actually see who is assigned to. So the people assigned to, there's only two. It's either you or the other person, right? But the whole idea here is to identify the things you have in common with them. So only tasks where both you and the other person have access to are followers of would show up here. And then I can see modified, and I can see the due dates. What's really useful about this view is if you have a one-on-one meeting with your manager and you go to this view, you can just immediately talk about the tasks that are overdue or that are due soon. And then you can imagine how simple it is that you don't have to open any other projects to actually go through the details. And so this is extremely helpful. But then at the same time, after or during the meeting, let's just say you come up with additional tasks that you want to get done. Guess what? You can click on Add Share Task directly here, create the task, choose the project it goes in, and you and your coworker, your manager or whatever, will automatically be invited to the same task. And so you can actually go down this list very, very quickly and able to create action items. The use case for this is pretty simple. I mean, I've heard over and over again, people go into a meeting, they talk about 1,000 different things. Afterwards, they have, 5 tasks that they want to get done. And then they leave the meeting, and then 2 weeks later, they have a follow-up, and then they ask for the status of those tasks, and the answer is like, oh, I didn't write it down. I forgot because I had another meeting afterwards, right? So instead, Party Matrix allow you to create the task directly during those meetings that you have, and then not only that, invites the appropriate people directly as well. So it skips all these other steps that makes it very difficult for you to create these action items. So keep that in mind, but very, very helpful for that purpose. And the way you add the one-on-one tab is you click on the plus icon here, you choose Party Matrix, and then you choose the one-on-one, and then you choose your collaborator. And so you can add this one-on-one with every single one of your coworkers. It could be your managers, your direct reports, or anybody else that you work with, and Party Matrix will automatically show you all those action items as well. Now, if you use Party Matrix, but you have the appropriate permissions with your IT, Party Matrix will actually show you Outlook action items that you have with them as well. And so this allows you to see planner tasks that you have with your coworker, emails that you have with your coworkers, upcoming meetings, and so forth. So Party Matrix is actually able to give you one coherent place to have all this information around action items, priorities, emails, meeting, and you don't have to go anywhere else. So I really like the one-on-one. It's very helpful for me to identify things that I work on with specific individuals. The other thing that's really neat about Party Matrix is how it integrates with the rest of the Microsoft Teams ecosystem. So for example, let's just say if you're chatting with somebody, right? And so for example, let's say here, the person said, could you send me a report? I can click on this ... here and create Party Matrix action item directly from here. And so when I do, I can actually choose the project, the quadrants, the due dates. And so I don't have to even jump into Microsoft Teams to actually convert a conversation into a task. What's really neat is Protomatrix takes records when or the context of that particular message as well. So let me give you an example. Let's just say if you and your manager are talking about a couple of different things, and then there's an action item that you create. Well, Protomatrix link back to Microsoft Teams to that moment in time when you had that conversation. So it creates this ability for you to go back and review the context. And so it's a really unique capability that I haven't seen anyone else do, but it's just a powerful way to ensure that when you work on something in 6 months or a year, Protomatrix will help you identify the reason why you're working on those things. And then, of course, Protomatrix has all these extensions as well, such as message cards, etc. You can see here, if I go here and I choose Protomatrix, I actually can send tasks directly in my conversation with anybody. Now, the reason for this, the use case for this, there's a couple of things. One, sometimes, I'm in Protomatrix and I assign a task to a coworker and they didn't see it for whatever reason. I can go to the chat here with them and then I can actually send them that Protomatrix task. And now it surfaces that up into one central place. And now they can open that, they can mark it as done, etc. And as you can see here, right below that, there's the Protomatrix chatbot, which is where I would get notifications of due dates or reminders, etc. So we actually have several other powerful integrations within Microsoft Teams as well. If you go to the App Store, you can actually search for workflow integrations where we have automations and so forth, but I won't go into that in today's webinar. But those are some of the things you can explore as you use Protomatrix more and more. I do want to just quickly show that if you go to the connector page in Protomatrix, you can actually integrate with Outlook calendars, planners, etc. So that's just something that you can connect. The more permissions you have that with Protomatrix, then the more it can do. But so again, some of these things are optional. One of the things I want to emphasize is that to get the most out of Protomatrix, you don't need to do any of these other things, right? You just have to go and use the quadrants as a place to manage priorities and use as a place to set due dates. So then you know exactly what you need to work on. So when you're in meetings, you know exactly, you can talk about the things that matter. But when you're ready to expand beyond that, Protomatrix has all the capabilities that you need to achieve everything else. Okay, with that, I'm actually going to go ahead and jump back to my presentation. Okay, so let's summarize. It's now up to you to take it to the next level. Unfortunately, no matter what we do as a prioritization tool, we cannot actually help you get those things done. You have to do it yourself. So if you haven't signed up for Protomatrix yet, make sure you sign up for Protomatrix. If you use Microsoft Teams and Outlook, you can sign in for those applications. Again, you don't actually need Teams or Outlook to use Protomatrix. Protomatrix works completely independently on our web app, our mobile app, our desktop app, etc. We also have Chrome, Gmail extensions. And then I would recommend that you create at least 3 projects: the personal priorities, the share team priorities, and your key initiative. Again, for the team priorities, that's the one that when you have your meeting projected on the big screen, I guarantee that you guys will have some meaningful discussions around what's really important. And then invite the appropriate team members if needed, and pitch on why it's important to focus on high impact tasks. I mean, I think that's one of those things where it seems obvious that you should do, but people don't do it enough because they're always just focused on themselves, on the tasks they have to do. But in reality, if you have a better understanding on the context of what it is that other coworkers are working on, etc., you'll have a better sense of the impact that you can make. And when you create action in Protomatrix, make sure you set due dates and make sure that you prioritize them in the appropriate quadrants and make sure that you actually mark them as done. So when you do that, then you'll feel accomplished in terms of using Protomatrix, and then you're able to add other action items, etc. And then the last advice here is ruthlessly prioritize. As I mentioned, don't have more than 25% of the things in quadrant 1. Don't have more than 25% of things in quadrant 2. If everything's important and urgent, then nothing is, so keep that in mind. A couple of suggestions. One, If you're very, very new to Protomatrix, use it to track high impact tasks. And so what I mean by that is you don't have to track like the things that are really minor if you think that's gonna, get in your way. Instead, use it to track the things that are most critical to your work, right? So then when you open up Protomatrix, you look at it, it's like, okay, these are my goals. These are the things I need to work on this month, this week, this quarter, etc. That's where the value Protomatrix will provide is around. So it helps you focus on the most important things, and then use Protomatrix as a communication tool. So don't think of Protomatrix as a project management software. It's not around managing projects. It's about making sure that everyone's on the same page. And the more people you have that's looking at Protomatrix as a place where you understand exactly what you need to work on, the more powerful it becomes. And so Protomatrix, at the end of the day, works, to help teams understand the priorities, but it always starts with the individual. Because if you as an individual do not leverage Protomatrix well, it's very, very hard for teams to leverage it well. So what success should look like with Protomatrix? One, you have one central place to track all your priorities. Everyone on the team understands and are aligned on the key tasks. Repetitive procedures are templatized to save time on future work, and that your important emails are prioritized. So I use Protomatrix every single day to prioritize all these emails that I have, ensuring that I have the appropriate due dates and so forth. And without it, it's very, very difficult to stay on top of everything I have to do. And so Protomatrix will work well when you have 3 projects or 300 projects. And so keep that in the back of your mind and definitely leverage all your integrations. That concludes my presentation. I'm going to look at the questions here if there's any questions. And if you have any other questions right now, you can send it to the chat and I'll try my best to address it. The question is, how do you get the HIPAA version of Protomatrix? So if you go to affluence.com, so let me go ahead and show you that view here. If you go to affluence.com, I have that open here, but if you go to affluence.com, which is our website, at the very top here, we have several versions, but you have the PM HIPAA, you click on HIPAA and it goes HIPAA.protomatrix.com. Now, when you go to Microsoft Teams and when you go to Outlook, search for Protomatrix and then just install the version that's HIPAA. The green is our theme for the HIPAA app, but that's how you have it in Outlook and Teams as well as our web app here. Now, a couple things to mention around that. Every version is completely siloed. So the standard version is siloed from the HIPAA version, which is siloed from the government version, which means they're stored on completely different data centers. So what that means is that, if your whole organization, if you use HIPAA, then your whole organization would have to use the HIPAA version, which is perfectly fine. But just keep that in mind because they don't talk to each other. They do have different licensing structure, though, for the HIPAA government as well as our standard application. Any other questions? Go ahead and type in the chat, and because I'm not able to turn people's audio on, so if you have a question, go ahead and type in the chat, and I'll be happy to take a look at it. So while I'm waiting, okay. The question is, do followers have to be in the same company or on your team, or they can be added as a guest? You can add followers as a guest. It depends on your use case, but what happens is Protomatrix will work across organizations. So for example, it doesn't have to be within the same domain, but you can actually work across organizations. So what that means is you can use it to collaborate with external clients. You can use it to work with, if you're a consultant, you can work with it, your consulting clients. In fact, we actually have a separate licensing option for consultants. So if you're a consultant, you can reach out to us directly and we'll give you information around that. But there's just a separate license allowing you to add guest users. So this is designed for agencies in particular, where you might have, just 3 or 5 team members, but then you might have 25, 50, or 100 clients. And each of those clients might be on their own separate projects, and so you can work with them, but they don't see each other. So that's the point. The question is, how would you recommend manage multiple accounts, consulting activity, and employment? So that's if you could reach out to us, support@affluence.com with that use case, because I'm not sure I understand exactly what you mean by the multiple accounts, but if you could give us a little bit more information around that use case, we can respond to you there in probably more details. But the way Party Matrix works is every single user has an account. But what that's, for example, my name, hi@affluence.com, that's my account, right? And so my coworkers might all have their own accounts. Now, if you have like a sort of a generic account, like support@affluence, and so you can still create that, but you just have to sign in and out of that. So you can't go and switch seamlessly within one browser, but because of how Teams work and how our Outlook app work, you can technically sign in as different accounts on different browsers and so forth. So that could be a workaround if you have multiple accounts that you work on. Now, I do recommend that you always assign, it's better to have a single person be responsible for a task, because usually that creates clarity. But we understand that sometimes some organizations use generic email addresses as user account. So to add it, you have it on Outlook, but you can add it to Teams. Let me show you how that works again. When you go to Microsoft Teams here, you click on Apps. And so from here, actually, in fact, Microsoft is featuring us here. So you can see how when I go to apps, Party Matrix is right here at the top for manage tasks within Teams. But you can also search for Party Matrix. And when you do, you have the option to install it right here. So again, the standard version is blue, the HIPAA version is green, and then the government version is orange. But it's very straightforward. You just install it, and then you just sign in with your account, and everything just syncs together magically. Now, some organizations require IT approval. If you have IT that wants to go and validate and so forth, and they need additional information, you can reach out to us. We do have security documents and so forth all available. Perfect. Thank you very much for all these questions. Feel free to reach out to me at hi@affluence.com if you have any other questions. But hopefully this will empower you with some knowledge that Party Matrix can be extremely helpful for prioritization. And again, look at it as a communication tool to make sure that everyone's on the same page. And so Party Matrix is really, really good at that aspect of things. And then I highly recommend installing our integrations because it just helps you create one central place to bring everything together. We have other integrations as well, but take advantage of whatever it is that helps you get started. I don't want to overwhelm you, but hopefully you'll find value in the software. Thank you very much. Fantastic.